looking for something like, business architecture, you will find in DAF what you need, but DAF is a little bit more because DAF is fundamentally, like I said, connecting the dots of different professions. So what I will do instead of sharing some PowerPoint, I will share a document that explains what is DAF, and then you can, download and read this document, when you have the time. So
I
the
already
first,
sent that to them.
Yeah, we have it.
perfect. So the first, diagram we want to look at is this one. You see, probably you are interested in, the first part. By the way, to the top, we have, a standard model that is created by the Open Group for IT is called, in which we have, different swim lines that represent value streams. So you see the first value stream, strategy to portfolio. So we have the strategic plan, the marketing plan, the operational plan. And then underneath we have jobs, okay? And one job is product and service design. Then we have business architecture, we have business planning and enterprise architecture. And you see on the very top, I invented a new definition that I call enterprise design. And the reason why I believe that a new definition is important is because if you talk about architecture with the right people, they will be very glad. But very often you say, hey, I'm not doing this job. I'm not interested. But at the end, it's not a matter of definition, but it's a matter of what we do. So we try to define the enterprise, okay, what they do, and then to translate, that definition something practical. And that is where we go to the lower part of the value stream. So requirement to deploy, request to fulfill, and detect to correct. And you see here we have all the jobs such as the solution architect, the solution development, so that is a developer, a business analyst, and finally a portfolio program and project management. Okay, so this describes the concept from the very conception up to its realization and put into motion. Now, what is the issue that we are trying to solve here is the fact that all those things are disconnected. Okay, so we have a standard slide that we use very often with clients in which we show what we find when we typically come in. So we have a variety of, Word documents, PowerPoints, Excel, and even within the same format, information is disconnected. Okay, so you have two PowerPoints that present the same concept, but it's unclear how PowerPoint 1 and PowerPoint 2 are related. Okay, so to do better, we need to use a model, but we need also to have a map. How is that supposed to work, that model? And that is what DAF is providing. So DAF provide different, so-called viewpoints. So we have viewpoints for business architecture, digital engineering, enterprise architecture, program management, solution architecture. Each of those viewpoints describe a part of the big story, but we can connect everything together. Now, not only we can connect that, but we can do in a very precise way so that we have a so-called machine readable model that can be used in a variety of applications from generating not a single document but all the documentation for the enterprise up to directly generating from that model information that can be used by machines such as code, okay, or API definition. Now let's go here. So how is that implemented? It's implemented as part of a so-called MDG, that is a package containing customization for this tool called Sparks Enterprise Architect, and that is where we will jump into the real demo. And so apart the basic DAF, that is the Digital Architecture Framework definition, what you will see today is something that is on the top of DAF that Michelle and we have developed in the last year, given or taken, that is called a Digital Twin Accelerator. Now, that brings us to a new, very important topic. The aim of DAF is to create a so-called digital twin of the enterprise. So probably you are familiar with this concept that the map is not the territory. Okay. So if you have like a map of something, we know that is not the territory because it's only a, very high level representation of the territory. A digital twin is, aimed to be the territory. So whatever you have in its digital form is equivalent to its reality. But that require a, much more engagement by all practitioners in creating this digital twin. And a digital twin can be extremely complex, and that's why to accelerate the creation of the digital twin, we have created this asset that we can use as a sort of template for creating the digital twin of the enterprise. So on the top of the fact that we have the digital twin based on DAF, we also strongly advise to use, models of industry to accelerate the overall creation of the digital twin. And for each industry, we have identified industry standards and we have, transformed those into models. For example, Pierre and Michel here, they use the telecom industry model, that is the so-called ODA or TM Forum Open Digital Architecture. That is a definition not of the enterprise, but if you think about it, what enterprise could be or should be, that can inspire, the real enterprise organization to create its digital twin. Okay, so now let's jump into the real demo here. So when you start this, so this is Spark's Enterprise Architect. Let me close a little bit of things so it's not too much overwhelming. Spark's Enterprise Architect is an extremely powerful tool, and it's also real cheap compared to most alternative that I'm familiar with. Okay, so that is another thing that we want to facilitate. We want to be able to say to our clients, the tool is not the real investment, because other competing tools, number one, they are not so open, so you cannot do everything that we do here. Number two, they are extremely expensive as a tool, but I always say that a fool with a tool is still a fool. So the real power is not the tool itself, but it's the people using the tool. So the approach here is, rather than investing into software, is, having that software really cheap, having those accelerators ready to go, and then invest into the people. Okay. So the difference between a diagramming, approach and a modeling approach is this thing is like a picture, but the real thing is inside the so-called browser, in which you can see the complexity of what we are talking about. So for example, you see here we have, everything organized as the Digital Twin Accelerator, and we have everything organized into sections. So if you are familiar with, some standards of enterprise architecture, you will recognize that we have catalogs that are a list of things, and then diagrams that are representation of things. Okay, so we will use diagram to navigate it, but really diagrams is only a, like the tip of the iceberg of what is the real model. So, and to show you something that you may be really familiar with, we have created this view here. So that is a typical business architecture view in which we have some concept, and that type of representation is coming from a book that Pierre and Michel are really fond of. I think the title of the book is How to Do Big Things, and describe a approach to business architecture. Now, one thing is having a book, describing that. Another thing is really have a physical implementation. This is what we are trying to do here. So for example, let's use a little bit of capabilities. So if we double click here, we will jump into another page. And here we have other links to different views of capabilities. So let's start with this one. So that is the telco capability model as is. So, and
the best one ever.
the best one ever. And you see here, you see something that you can also do on PowerPoint. But if you check this out, you will see that this is a dynamic reading of information, because we have properties that are underneath each capability, a lot of them. So you see here we have the name of the capability, we have a description of the capability, and under DAF we have a lot of different information. That is the real power of DAF. So you see we have the business value of the capability, we have the capability level, we have the category, we have the cost. This is a information that is aggregated based on the characteristic of the capability. We have the business criticality of the capability, the IDs, and what we are reading here, you see the capability as is. I hope my screen is not too small. And right now you see this color that is like red. And the reason is because this this increment that describes the capability as is initial. So if I put it to be like define, and then I click OK, you should see the color changing, dynamically. Okay, see that the color has changed because all the information that is in this model is dynamically read. So each diagram in which any type of information is displayed will now update to reflect the fact that the capability has been updated. So let's visualize something else. For example, here we have the same, but for business value. As you remember, business value is another information. Same thing. We have a heat map of business value, and you can, like gather business values like in interview, or you can use machine to assess the business value, using an algorithm, parsing, information. And then this is the type of information that you can, provide to your executive. Like I said, this is nothing that is supposed to be used as is, but it's an accelerator so that you don't need to create all the stuff, manually. So for example, this is a Kanban. So in a Kanban, we can work with information. This is the same information that we saw previously with, the capability maturity as is. Now imagine you are in a meeting and you interview people and you say, okay, what is, your current assessment of customer operation management? And we say, hey, it's really good, so we move it here. And now all the diagrams will reflect that. The heat map that we saw previously will reflect that.
Okay.
Now, we have something like 300 different, templates for this, so we don't have the time to go into that. So I want to show you a little bit of the so-called DAF Metamodel and how that works pragmatically. So let's go here. Yeah,
I have
go
a
on.
quick question. Well, I have a question. So you have this software, and my understanding is that what we are seeing here in terms of business value, if it's defined or not, is for the telco industry, right? So
Partially.
once, if you leave,
the
but I
model
guess my
that you
question is
see.
more,
Okay, go on. Sorry.
my question is more like when you leave Videotron, like your contract is over, you leave Videotron, do they keep this to do the assessment later on themselves, or you take everything with you, they don't have access to this, and if they want to do another assessment, they'll have to hire Levio again?
Okay.
Normally what we come in with tools, because on top of the model, Ju has developed some AI tools to be able to ingest, for instance, PDFs or Visios and stuff like that. Okay, so these tools, they remain Levio's property. Okay, but the model itself, they obviously can continue nourishing and maintaining up to date, because it's for them it's to their advantage that they continue
Right.
nourishing it and keeping it up to date. But by experience, the organization do not have the skill sets to be able to play around with this in a significant fashion. They can probably maintain it if in a steady stage, but if they're contemplating something new down the road, introduction of a new product or line of product, or they want to buy a company and they want to merge it with their existing company and stuff like that, usually they do not have the skill set to be able to do that, and they go back to Levio and ask for help in their next step.
Okay.
In general, what is important to keep in mind is the capability model that I'm showing you is an example of a capability model that is different from DAF. DAF can support any type of capability model in any industry. Okay, DAF is providing to you the structure of the capability model. So another feature of DAF is the ability to modify DAF itself. Because think about what I have shown you on the characteristic of a capability. Okay, so like the capability has its characteristics called increments. Let's say that you don't like that because you work for the Canadian government and they call it whatever they want to call it. And they would say, we cannot call it increments. So what you do is to use DAF itself as a template to create the so-called meta model. Let's call it Canadian, whatever meta model. Okay. That will fit them exactly. But instead of this being a 2 years project, you can do that in a couple of weeks. And then you start customizing that meta model. So you have new characteristic for capabilities and for everything else. Okay. Then the next stage is, okay, do we have for like public industry model? I know a couple of them, which one can be relevant, and you import that industry model inside your model. Now, to answer your question, if you think about the concept of digital twin, what we want to produce is the twin of whatever organization. So clearly that belongs to them. The tools that we have, frankly, my own opinion, after so many years of experience, every company wants to own everything, but no one really wants to maintain, those things. And especially consulting companies, they don't want to invest, their time and money, maintaining tools. The real value of consulting company, like Pierre said, is knowledge how to use the tools. Okay. So let me jump into some practical examples. So until now, we have only seen things that are ready to go. Let's say you want to create something new. So I go here to the sandbox. I will create a new diagram. Now you see those are all the aspect of DAF. You see DAF, symbol is a delta, Greek delta. So let's say that we want to do something like in business architecture, we could start with something like a cross-map strategy. Okay, so we are creating a new diagram. So when we do create a new diagram, what happens is we are going to have a so-called toolbox, and that toolbox contains the subset of DAF, concept that we believe are part of the so-called view or viewpoint. Okay, so let's start with something like a value stream. So I can, drag and drop the value stream here. Now, one thing, let's say I call it value stream X. Now, one thing that is really difficult about modeling is only good as the relationship that we can, create in a model. But very often people ask, okay, what is that I can create? And that is a, main feature of DAF. You will see that here we can create DAF elements. Okay, so the only thing that is valid within DAF, if you are creating a value stream, is either the value stream is enabling a capability or include a process. So we go for capability, and we have now created a capability. Now, let's go from capability and say, okay, what is that we can do in capability? So we can see that a capability is supporting a goal. So that is the goal of the enterprise. And a enterprise goal is operationalized by a capability. Okay. Now, how is that we, implement physically the goal? We implement typically a goal by a initiative. And the relationship between initiative and capability is that you see the name of, I would zoom in so that's easier to see. So in DAF, the concept is that initiative will increase the maturity of a capability. You remember that we started with capability maturity as is, okay? So let's say that the goal is to reduce cost, okay? So, and what is that we are going to do to reduce cost? We're going to increase, the efficiency of a certain capability. And we do a, initiative to do that. We expect at the end of the initiative, to have an increase of the maturity. But we need also to be able to measure that. And this is what we do with KPIs. So that is a so-called measurement indicator. And that is what is measuring the current capability. Okay. Now, so far, so good. Those are probably all concepts that you are familiar with, but how is that you connect with, the rest of the story? So a capability is supported by multiple elements. So for example, it's supported by a business process. So we have a set of business processes that, to really increase the maturity of this capability, we need to analyze, probably optimize, or maybe create new processes. Then we have also roles or people working for, at the physical level of the capability. And then we have information that is connected to the capability. So that is information at very high level, so-called data entities, or they are simply concepts that are, we use when we manipulate the capability. And finally, we have logical applications that is different from, physical applications. So this will be like a ERP system, okay, enterprise resource planning. That is not like SAP or any physical implementation of that, so that we can separate those aspects, okay? But
just for you, do you have any questions, Andresa and Linda? Because he's been showing a lot of stuff so far. So any questions?
No, I'm following.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay, so because we don't have a lot of time, this is already showing some of, the concept that we have previously discussed, okay? Think about this, some executive will create goals, okay? And then some business architect people will create the capability and the value streams, okay? And then probably identify also some measurement indicators. And then we pass to enterprise architecture, and enterprise architect will start to define, this, lower, level. And then we pass to program management, and they will attach their initiative to the capability so that we can all work together. I mean, we can have also a single person creating all this work, but if we engage with other people, we know exactly how to, do that. Now, finally, in refer to what Pierre said, not only we have the ability to, start a project with a template like this, but also we have some technical capability to digest existing information. Because even if a organization is not real mature, probably they have a ton of relevant information that are, old in different repositories, in different formats, and so on. So typically, the first part of a project is we come in and we digest all this information, we transform to the basic model. And then we start some analysis and we say, okay, this is what is missing. That then we have an as-is situation. And then we can start proposing a 2B and a roadmap.
So if you go to an industry that you don't know much about, let's say it's a random example like banking, right? Like I know that Levio works in that space, but something outside of telco, how do you identify the capabilities of that industry?
The first thing that I will do is search for a industry model that typically describe that. In the case of banking, we have an industry model. So, and we have identified for each of the major, industry that Levio support, a industry model that we would like to, support. Ideally, we already have all those industry models ready to go. I have another presentation, maybe another time we can go over that. This real PowerPoint. But for each of the industry that we want to support at Levio, we have an industry model ready to go. Now, the next thing will be, okay, even if you have the industry model, if you don't know the industry, what you can do with that. So ideally, Levio will already in advance invest in those models in the sense that you are familiar with them. However, the advantage of using a models are really standardized. So soon you learn like how to navigate a industry is way easier to transition to the next industry because, you have things like capability, you have things like processes, and clearly you need to understand the content, but at least the structure is very, very similar.
Okay. We do have a model for the federal government, but TBS, which is the Treasury Board, they are the ones they're the policy arm of the government. So they do have a business capability model for all of the common services across all departments. But each department has their own mandate. So there is a component of that mandate that is very particular to that department. So that is the part where when we come in, we kind of have to create one for them, almost from scratch. So we do research and all, but there is a lot of engagements that we do before we identify that capability. Like we have to do interviews, we have to understand their processes, and then be able to distill that into a business capability.
Yeah, and clearly that is in any case a big part of what we do as consultant. However, and with nowadays more and more people expect to see automation in all of that. So for example, currently we're working with a major player in the telecommunication space in the United States. And one of the reasons why, they want to go with us is because we are not simply interviewing people, but we are so adopting things such as, for example, process mining, EA to analyze existing documents. So what I'm doing right now is they already did some of those interviews by themselves and they gather information PowerPoint. Okay. So, and we were not even able to get the PowerPoint. So I was only able to get screenshots of the PowerPoint and then I use AI to transform that into a model. Because we easily demonstrate that if you have like 5 PowerPoints, so one of the things that we said is today organizations are super complex and we try to mask that complexity, creating what I call island of simplicity. It's this, issue with the so-called agile mindset. In a big, scope, then you try to reduce everything on a small window, like looking through a keyhole. And indeed, you have a view. But then another person looking another keyhole has another view. And, there is this famous story, Indian story of, blind people touching the elephant. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Everyone is touching a different part of the elephant, okay? And they describe what they touch, and they're completely right from their blind point of view. But no one has the picture of the big elephant, okay? So we want to facilitate this. And like I said, interviewing people typically provide a view on the system, but you need to be able to harmonize everything together and do what we call impact analysis. Okay, so how is X related to why and so on.
Yeah.
I am thinking about one of the biggest initiatives in government right now. It's with ESDC. So they do all of the social services like your pensions, OAS, things like that. And it's exactly as you're describing it. They've got 3 different consulting firms all in there working, maybe 4. They've got Fujitsu, Accenture, Deloitte. Anyway, so there's a bunch of them, and they each have been given a piece of the puzzle. And it's kind of a mess because they don't have much of a program management office to oversee any of this. So there's a lot of people initiating changes and nobody can get a big picture. So I am looking at this going, is this an instance where this would help resolve that?
Absolutely.
So to give you a sense of the scope, I was working on how they were going to implement a contact center. So right now they're, have sort of basic call center. They were looking at doing the procurement, introducing like a chat channel. So this is where I was focused. But they also were introducing a new case management system. So how they're going to manage all the benefits. And so then we got into conversations about, how do we allow officers who would normally just be on the telephone to now maybe do back office work when things are slow? So we're changing the work environment for those people. How do the different systems talk? Where do I go to get my work? So there's a lot of unanswered questions that we were working through. So if that was the scenario that came to you, and you have this tool here, I'm curious how you would leverage it. So we did do a lot of capability mapping. So we talked about which capabilities they were going to get sooner, which ones were coming later, like more transformative. We did have conversations about the change management piece of all this too. So this one's, your quick win. These ones are things that everyone really wants. So there's a lot of different material coming there that I could see with your capabilities. I could, start to fill out, here's the capability, here's the maturity today or the desired interest or whatever. But I don't know, can you kind of, if that was your use case, how would I come into this sort of software and help resolve it? And I know this one's complicated because you probably don't want Accenture and everyone going in the same tool and manipulating things. But anyway, given that kind of complexity.
Because we are recording this, I will not comment on Accenture, but I will tell you that this is very often the case in my career. I came in and I discovered that the organization has spent considerable amount of money on companies like Accenture. And then, the typical thing was, okay, so what? How we leverage this? That was one of my motivation, to start creating DAF. So to be able to follow up, okay? Now, I think I'm still sharing my screen. But you see, the first thing that we will do is, number one, digest all this information into the model. And then if you look at, this small example that we have created, the first rule is divide and conquer. So in your, short exposition, Linda, you're describing a different variety of things. We are talking about the capability. We are talking about people and the need of taking care of people, and their skill and their, work environment. So change management. We are talking about a business process that work in a certain way. And then we are talking about, certain logical application like contact center that they need to introduce. They are all really different problems, because you cannot solve that, on the same level. The business process can be solved in a certain, way. Change management is different and so on. But all of that, we know that is somehow attached to the capability. Okay, so what you want to do is the ability to continue to plan and report on the capability, but still have this attached to all the different levels that need to be further decomposed in, okay, for this one, I want to have a complete BPMN process flow as is, so that then we can simulate this and verify how we can optimize it, okay? For this one, I want to start creating a matrix of skills that are required in the new, to be, situation. For this one, I want to formulate requirements so that we don't jump to the software solution before we even know what we want. That is something that is really often happen. You know how many times we come in and they say, we don't know what the problem is, but we have decided that this is, the software that we are going to get, and this one is so very, very important, very often underestimated, which information are we passing around, okay? So we need to create a initial version of the so-called information model so that we know typical information is very stable in time, but people don't think in this way. They think in terms of, oh, let's buy a software and the tool will do the magic. So that is how I will start, such a project, import things and then divide and conquer, separate concern and focus on certain things rather than having everything on the same, visualization and mixing up completely concepts.
I find interesting that you have data attached to the capability itself as opposed to the business process. Because the context comes from the business process, right? Like how automated, how manual, and all that. Like there is that part of it too.
You see, in architecture, one very important concept is to divide two main categories of things. And the two main categories are called behavior and structure. Okay, so a business process, not true that the business process comes first or second, but behavior structure comes from semantic. So when we talk about grammatic, behavior will be any verb, and structure will be any noun or subject that we use. And check this out. This is a subject, like someone initiating an action. That is an action, and that is the noun, the thing we are acting upon, and that is the technology that may support those three things. Okay, so this is a standard, understanding of things. But like I said, very often you come in organizations say, oh, no, 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 I know better. And I'm not going to argue with that. What I'm going to say is that, okay, the only thing that is important is to maintain consistency. Because the real issue, I like that with, Quebecois French, Acadian French, and French, they are not the same, okay? But if you have enough people, even, British English and American English, if you have enough people in agreement that that is the rule and they are consistent in following the rule, then we are fine. The real issue that we have nowadays is you ask two people in the same department and they have two different opinions. So that means that when they create information, they create in a way that all the people will not understand, or even worse, they believe they understand, but they don't. So having a common language within the enterprise is crucial. And again, DAF is not coming from saying, hey, this is the thing and everyone else is wrong. But that is a good start. And then let's have a conversation of what is that you need to, modify so that adjusts your culture.
So the way I'm understanding this right now is we can feed it a lot of this information, right? Here are the processes, here's the capabilities we need, these are requirements we've validated for the tools. And then it gets to the so what. So I'm going to see these heat maps of, okay, this is where you're at with your current state, but does this application help me, define the business case for doing something? Does it help me visualize the roadmaps? What are some of the outputs then that I would take from this? Because I know you were saying a client can maybe maintain it, but they can't use it to get to the next step. So I'm wondering, is there other views or things that you'd then use with this application to help you with that?
Okay. First off, we need to distinguish between the application and what we have built on the top of the application. Okay. So Enterprise Architect is a powerful tool. But if you open it, it's what I call a empty, ugly box. So it's not doing a lot that you will expect. Especially, ironically, even if it's called Enterprise Architect as a tool, it's not doing a lot for enterprise architects. Okay. However, what is that we have done? So there's a lot that we can do now. For example, let me see. You ask about the roadmap. So you see here we have decision and we have initiative, and on the initiative, for example, here we have a example roadmap. Is that the roadmap that you will use? Maybe not, but that is an example. So you see those are DAF initiative, information, so elements. So that is, a timeline, and you have also dependencies between initiatives, okay? Now, the important thing in this type of visualization is keep in mind that the intent of a good diagram is never to show everything, but only to show a certain aspect of it. Because, for example, each initiative needs to be connected with a amount of things that are going to be impacted by the initiative. And that is how you automatically track the health of the initiative. Okay. So to give you an hint, so those are some of the characteristics of the initiative. First off, we have some characteristics. Those are really characteristic of the tool. Each so-called element, that can be anything, not only as a name, but as a status, alias, keyword, the author, the complexity, the version and phase, that are two different ways to assess that. But then on the DAF, we have also, finish date, impacted capability, initiative duration, initiative status, and you see here we have a color coding. What is the kind of initiative, purpose, what is the rank of initiative compared to our initiative, so that we can, say which one is more important and so on. If that initiative is part of a bigger program, so that we can track all of that and take decisions. And then what is that we can do with this? We can create a Word document, we can create a Excel spreadsheet, we can publish into the web in different formats, we can transform that into, Jira tickets, and on and on and on. So it's endless what we can do. And today we're only trying to scratch, the very surface of everything. So if you have any specific, ask, maybe we can organize another session which we go into that, very specific use case.
And if I may, sorry, I had to take a call here, but as an executive before in various companies, I've always pushed for enterprise architecture, and sometimes you have to call it something else because people sometimes perceive enterprise architecture as some IT trip from the nerds in IT. Okay, so sometimes I call it strategy because I believe it is strategy. But all that to say that when you use this tool, you're much faster at decision making, even if it's Ju has brought it to a level that I've never expected would be possible with this AI stuff and all that. But if you just think about having a model that's semi well populated, and with Michel at Videotron, we did this. And we were able, when I joined Videotron, I would my stance as CIO was 8 years, and then for 18 months I did something else before leaving that had nothing to do with IT. But the point was that I brought the IT shop capable of answering a marketing request of how much time, how much dollars would it cost to do this, to hours, okay, when it was weeks before. So this helps. But beyond that, if you start applying stuff that you two ladies seem to resonate with, business capabilities, value stream, and all that, I found it to be a great decision-making process for the C-suite. Okay, I know you're in public sector and this is different in private sector, but in private sector, Michel and I use this to seek decisions, for instance, on a minimum viable product. And of course, the normal behavior of management is to want everything day one, but your reaction as a delivery unit is to say, hey, bring it down to something that's usable, and we'll give you release 2, release 3, release 4, and we'll deliver some value gradually in increments. Well, these tools are great for that. My particular favorite is business capability, because you present this to a C-suite and it's their company on an apron or on a placemat, and they like to work with this. And you can do all sorts of things with this. You can have heat maps, you know, saying complexity. And of course, if you have the model, then you can easily answer questions, because below a business capability, you have the applications, you have the data, you have all these things that are available, and you can answer questions of, you know, how long does it take to do this in a relatively fast way? And you can even bring the model, or you know, Michelle and I did it with macros on Visual Basics. I mean, this was not a pretty technology, but it worked in the sense that we were able to take bubbles and say this bubble becomes red because it's complex, and this bubble becomes yellow because it's less complex but still more complex than the green ones. And the you know, the dotted line around it meant this is a strategic you know, capability to delivery of something, you know. So these are all things that I think, you know, are enabled by the model and the digital twin behind the model that helps a lot. So you were asking the questions, you know, like, how do we work this out, and can it help in a situation where, you know, pieces of the puzzle are spread between people? I think this is an excellent way of doing this, and getting the traceability. When you make a decision, you understand the impact on everything, you know. So that's the value of this thing. I cannot be, you know, I'm not an architect like the two guys that are in front of you beside me, but I'm an executive that saw the value of this like 30 years ago, and I've been applying it ever since.
How long is a typical engagement to do this?
It depends on the scope.
size.
Yeah, but typically we have a template that we have created that we call the assessment, in which we try to define a very short series of activities that will, you know, basically go through the enterprise, assess what is the current state, what is that they want to do, and then propose a very initial high-level roadmap. And that
So
assessment can be done in 2 weeks.
There's something that Gio is not mentioning, is that there are accelerators built into the model. So I'll give you an example. So you could ingest applications through an Excel spreadsheet with the template that we use to load stuff. So the reason why we can do faster is because we ingest stuff, we don't have to retype stuff. So to Pierre's point, if you have documents that are relevant, we could ingest them and create the model. And Gio went as crazy as screenshots, which I think for me is a bit much, but he's able to do that. So the good thing is that you don't have to spend much time on gathering information. You spend more time on analysis. That's really the thing is. So I'll give you an example. At Telesat in Ottawa, we had all these information in PowerPoint and PDFs and Excel. We load that in, and what we were able to show is that there were missing links into their approach. And we did that in 5 weeks. Okay, so we can go really fast because we ingest stuff based on the actual stuff that they have. Okay, and to your point, Linda, there's something that we could do in the case that you have multiple providers. If we can ingest their material into our model and not giving it back, you can create links that, sorry, these guys cannot do. So as we do for a customer to ingest their material, we can ingest stuff. So one thing that we have done also at Telesat, these guys were fond of Camunda. Those are BPMN diagrams. We ingested them into the model and we linked them to the other stuff that these guys were not able to do. Once again, we show them that there was missing stuff in their process that they have defined. So once again, the thing is, the goal is to get you guys as fast as possible using the information to make decisions. That's the goal of this. And by having all those relationships between the things, if they do not exist today, as Gio has shown, you can create those relationships anyway because they're tied into the meta model, and you need to know, okay, if I have a capability, these are the things that I need to gather. So maybe it won't be you two, but could be other people gathering that information, loading that in, and you make the magic of linking those things together. So
But
I think this is
to
where
answer the original question is, okay, how fast can you do that? What I'm showing is a template for a Word document. The important thing is this Word document can be 100% produced from the model. Okay, you simply digest the information in the template, the DTA template that I show you, and then as soon you have provided all the information, you press the button and you produce a complete report. Okay, and the way in which is organized is in 3 steps. Orientation is as is, where are we? Okay, destination is where you want to go, and routing is, the initial roadmap. And as you can see here, we have a complete description of all, the activities, including the fact that here we are, interviewing, key stakeholder, formulate as is business scenario in form of a narrative, what keep me awake at night. Okay, and then as a result of this, you create a as is business scenario, and then confirm capability, create new capability, place in domain, assess as is capability maturity, and then map business capability to business goal. That is the orientation, and then envision the 2 business scenario. That is, what I want to do, or which company I want to be in, X time from now. That can be, 3 months or 3 years, whatever they want to do. And then assess capability, maturity to be, and then design initiative to increase capabilities. And then you group initiative into programs, you plan value management, and you draft the program structure. And then what you deliver is a strategic plan to achieve the result, and then you submit to your client. You say, okay, this is what we can do in very limited time. So that is crucial, because a lot of organizations are, convinced that to do something like that, you will require, months, if not years, and then produce some paper. But, the approach that we would like to take is, no, not only we are fast, but also everything that we produce can be followed up by all the projects, even by yourself. Typically, we say that, but we know that that is not true, because they don't have the skill set. Even companies that are supposed to be high level, in certain things, like our current customer in the United States, is amazing how little knowledge they have of certain things, or maybe they do have the skill set, but it's not available to that specific, division or organization, because you have people doing that, but in another part of the organization.
So pardon me, I have to go, but listen, Drenza and Linda, if within your organization system scope, now that you're part of the big Levio family, if you see interest in presenting this in a wider audience for your enterprise architect or whoever, even change management, because I know this helps a lot in change management. We'll organize it. We'll make it happen.
I do have to go as well. I think DAF is a great tool. This is really, really good, and I do see us using in the federal government. There's a great fit in here. It would be great to show this to the system scope people, Linda, I would say. I do have to go now, so I really appreciate, but Linda, you can finish and we will be in touch. Thank you so much, everyone.
I have to go.
Thank you, Andretta.
With a pleasure meeting you.
Nice meeting you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Linda, you have a last question before we close it?
No, I was going to say the same thing. I can think of like 3 clients off the top of my head that I could run materials through and come back and say, look at this, and they'd be astounded. The example I had given you too, with so many people involved, your brain can only hold so much, and they were frustrated because you didn't know what somebody else did 2 years ago on the project. Like, there was no ability to consolidate at all. So, I feel like if you went in and presented them something like this, they go, oh, geez, maybe we should have done that in the first place.
Ah!
Um, so yeah, there's a lot of past projects. I'm thinking of my current project. I don't know if we want to stop recording, but I am trying to think
Yeah,
whether
let me stop
there's a
recording.
fit.
So Linda,